Hello and bienvenido, San Antonio. Welcome to the Alamo Hour, discussing the people, places, and passion that make our city. My name is Justin Hill, a local attorney, a proud San Antonian, and keeper of chickens and bees. On the Alamo Hour, you'll get to hear from the people that make San Antonio great and unique and the best kept secret in Texas. We're glad that you're here. All right, welcome to episode 10 of the Alamo Hour. Today's guest is Tom Kayser. Tom is a baseball man. He was the president of the Texas League for 25 years. It's one of 3 AA minor leagues. That's a yes. I got a head nod.
Sorry.
He wrote Baseball in the Lone Star State, the Texas League's greatest hits. He wrote the Texas League Almanac. In 2016, he was inducted into the Texas League Hall of Fame. We've asked him on here today to talk about Texas baseball, the missions. The missions were part of the Texas League, and I think Tom's got a lot to add on anybody who's interested in baseball, anybody who's followed, the city's quest to get a baseball team, and sort of the considerations there. So, Tom, thank you for being here.
I'm happy to do it.
I always start these with kind of a top 10 list, get to know a little bit more about you, get to know sort of your connection to our city. You do live in San Antonio, right?
Absolutely.
How long have you lived here, and sort of what part of town have you lived in?
Bought a house at inside of 1604 and east of 281 back in October of 93, and I still live in that house.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
A lot's changed there.
Oh,
Jeez.
It has. There wasn't anything on the other side of 1604. As a matter of fact, Gold Canyon wasn't even there.
Oh, wow.
Back then, and you could go across 281 on a bridge, on Henderson Pass. Yeah. It used to cross over there, and can't do that anymore, but too many people.
So you've been here a long time.
I have.
Straight the whole time, 93 on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're in COVID shutdown, so this is kind of a strange question, but I think it works. Any favorite place to eat right now? We're doing a bunch of takeout. We're trying to support our old favorites, but is there any spot you're going to, or are you shut down?
No, I'm a pretty good cook, so
okay.
I HEB basically buy my supplies, but we're coming out of the soup season. I'm just finishing a barley mushroom soup, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
It's having had my office in my house, it's really what I tended to do is eat at home a lot. I wish I could come up with a top 10.
I need to learn.
Perico's on Saturday morning on 1604 because we've had a group, going to breakfast on Saturday mornings for tacos
that's great.
Forever.
Yeah.
It's down to a very slimmed down group of 4, but
not right now.
No, we really miss it too, boy.
Well, we'll be there again soon. I had Commissioner Calvert on here, and I said we'll get back to normal soon, and he was not very encouraging to my optimism. So I'm hoping he's wrong, because I think we all need to. You've lived here long enough, and you have been involved in baseball on a side of town that I really haven't spent much time where the missions play in that part of town. Are there any things in San Antonio that you think are kind of hidden gems, is what I call them? You've got somebody coming into town and you go, yeah, but this isn't in the guidebook. You really need to go see this or do this thing.
I tend to take people to the Pearl for sure. But there are so many things that are on the top 10 that it's like if you don't do those things, you really haven't seen San Antonio.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Walking around downtown, going to the cathedral. I don't think enough people go to the cathedral downtown. The
missions, to me, like the other missions, those
absolutely.
are beautiful.
And I have done that where put people in a car, we'll just do mission, drive from mission to mission. And then, things that are hill country kind of stuff that you take people up and drive up 281.
Day trips.
Or, go see, a place like Comfort or certainly Blanco and see the courthouse there.
Yeah, Blanco's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
It's now become kind of shishi. It's not Fredericksburg, but it's a lot more, attractive to go visit.
But as far as San Antonio, again, there's when you've got people coming in for a short period of time, it's tough they're tough for little gems.
No, that's right. That's right.
You go to the Villeta, you walk around the River Walk, and it's just, certainly I think that when you take them to the Alamo and their first response is, "Oh boy, this is so. I didn't realize it was so small."
That's right.
So, well, if back then it was lots more stuff here. It's sort of been whittled down over the years.
It's not the grand size of it. It's the import of what happened.
Right.
What are you doing with your time? So you're retired, right?
I am.
So what do you do? I mean, you cook, obviously. What else do you do to kind of stay busy?
Well, right now it's a challenge. Lots more reading. My garden's in as good a shape as it's ever been in.
Okay.
And,
yeah, mine too.
It's almost daily go out and prune and pluck and get the dead stuff out of there. And
what are you reading?
Oh boy, I'm an eclectic reader. I love history. I just got done with a Walter Mosley book. He's one of the great writers, one of the great wordsmiths. If people don't know Walter Mosley,
I don't know him.
Oh, he's magical.
Nonfiction, fiction?
It's fiction. He's Easy Rollins was his detective. Devil in a Blue Dress.
Okay.
And he did a whole series of that. But this guy just is. He writes from the black perspective. And his protagonists and genres are almost entirely African American, but his use of the language is spectacular.
Okay, it's a lost art.
Yeah. And my guilty pleasure is British, naval swashbucklers, and I just read one of a series by an author named Michael Aye. Smart and Stable Genius.
Okay.
I just read that, and I think my hair is starting to uncurl.
We'll leave that there because this could go in many directions.
And now I'm reading Longitude.
What's that one?
That's the discovery of seaworthy chronometers that would help mariners establish exactly where they're located, and the story of who it was and how it happened. I'm just starting that.
Okay.
So
seems very dense.
No, it's very thick, or very thin, but it's it was recommended. I've read somebody recommended it and said, "Oh, it's a great read."
Okay. All right. So we got more questions for your episode than anybody so far, which I didn't realize people that are baseball fans are real baseball. You don't have a fair weather group. I mean, the people that are into it. So one of the questions I've incorporated into this is sort of who were the highest profile players that came through the Texas League while you were there? And they specifically said not the ones coming through injury or out of retirement.
Well, very first year, Mike Piazza was here in San Antonio.
I didn't know that.
And he was only in the Texas League for something like 30-some days because he just tore it up. And I never saw him play in the Texas League. Back in 1992, my offices were still in Illinois. I ran the Texas League from Rockford, Illinois for 2 seasons until I got, sell my condo and, eventually buy my house here. Mike Trout. I can remember, and what a nice young kid.
Mike Trout came through the Texas League?
He was at Arkansas for an entire season.
I know that.
I can remember, Adrian Beltre was, 18-year-old phenom coming up through the Dodgers system, and Dodgers have a tendency, or did then, to over-promote, not over-promote in terms of what league they were going to go to, but over-promote in the, build somebody up and, as a trade value kind of thing.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, I've heard this before, and he stepped into the box for his first Double-A at bat. He didn't even see a pitch, and my eyes are bulging because of the way he approached the plate and got ready for that first at bat. He looked like a 10-year veteran.
Oh yeah,
he was like 18. Oh golly, there's so many. Bobby Abreu came through this league. Berkman, Correa.
Like full seasons for a lot of these guys.
Yeah. There's so many Houston guys and St. Louis, and J.D. Drew came through here, and I mean, it just, the list is almost endless. But some of the those are guys that come to mind immediately.
Was Mike Trout just knocking the skin off the ball back then too?
Oh, he was like a Mickey Mantle.
He's a freak.
I mean, you couldn't hit a ball over his head, and he just looked so good.
Yeah.
I don't think he was 20, or he was 19, 20 years old when he came through the Texas League.
I watched videos of him playing in high school, and
yeah. You see these guys, and it's like, how did he last until late first round, which I think he was 24, 28, somewhere in there. Oh, yeah. Well, it's because he was from New Jersey, and, who comes out of New Jersey, and they have a short season in terms of the period of, when high schools can play, where you're not dodging, snowstorms in April.
Yeah.
And just good scouting, so, yeah, every year it seemed like there was somebody.
I mean,
Felix Hernandez, King Felix, who came through here.
Yeah.
Later traded, or he was with Seattle. He was their, a great starting pitcher for so long.
Trout signed the biggest contract in history, and he came through. So it's hard to top that.
Oh yeah, no, it's and he was here almost the entire season, if not the entire season.
So did he come through and play in San Antonio at any
absolutely.
point?
Oh, absolutely. He'd have done it only twice.
Okay.
Because of the way the Texas League schedule, you'd have seen maybe 5 games in each half, but he was here.
Okay. Wow. I mean, to been able to see him at a Double-A would be a cool thing to say you've seen. And
he did. It was cool.
Okay, so outside of, you're a historian. You're obviously a fan of sport. Do you have a team that you follow, like your go-to Cowboys fan or whatever it is?
Oh yeah, Pirates.
Okay, all right.
And I wasn't a Pirate fan. I was a Dodger fan growing up, then a Cub fan later, because my first game I ever saw was in the Coliseum in L.A.
All right.
And then we moved back to Chicago, and that was the Ernie Banks, Ron Santo bunch, and that was fun to be able to just hop on a train and go to Wrigley Field. And when I went to school, I was in a small school in downtown Pittsburgh, and boy, did I take a ribbing, because the Pirates, own the Cubs, the Willie Stargell bunch.
Yeah.
And then it was ironic. Then I went, from owning a minor league baseball team to going to Pittsburgh as the assistant minor league director, and I still bleed black and gold.
Okay. Well.
And it's a long suffering.
Well, it's great to say you got to work for him too.
Yeah,
who gets to do that?
Exactly.
Are the balls juiced?
I think they must have had something going on, because I just read an article. If you had all these home runs last season, and then in the playoffs, it seemed like the long balls took a drop. Well, just recently it was discovered that they used some baseballs from 2018 in the playoffs.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So that explains, the difference in productivity, apparently. People were saying, well, there's, nobody's hitting home runs like they did during the season. What's going on? And it's like, well, where did you find? It's not like the Texas League where they call Tom up and say, Tom, do you have any spare baseballs? Where I always had about 10 or 20 dozen in my garage, because the companies, Rawlings would send each league 10 dozen balls at the start of the season for special events. I just kept them there for emergency. And there were times when it's like, a shipment didn't arrive, and, we need balls. And it's like, I'll get them, will 10 suffice? Oh, 10 would be beautiful.
Would y'all have been using the same balls in the Texas League this past season as major leagues?
It's a different quality.
Okay.
It's I can't tell you what the difference is, whether it's the yarn, it's whether the way it's sewn, or, whatever it is.
Sure.
The major league ball had a different quality. Now, beginning I think in 19, AAA and AA were using the same ball as Major League Baseball, but it wasn't happening when I was president.
Okay. So did you ever look, or do you know whether their home run numbers went up like Major Leagues?
Okay. I don't. Once I retired, I wasn't following it quite so strictly. I would see things. Now, having said that, Tulsa during the playoffs set an all-time Texas League record by hitting 9 home runs in a playoff game. So one might surmise that
something was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the biggest changes you have seen to this city since you moved here in '93?
Well, certainly population density. When I moved here, it was below 800,000.
Oh.
Now we're almost 2 million, if not over 2 million.
Yeah.
And where I live is 23.4 miles from Wolf Stadium, and it used to take me maybe 20 minutes.
just zip through.
Yeah. And toward the end, it was like there were days when it could be 45. When 218 or 281 was all bunged up or whatever.
When you were the president, was Wolf Stadium where your office was, or was it at your house?
No, I had my offices in my house.
Okay.
Right. Which was, it's sort of good practice for what we're going through now.
Did you convince the league to let you move to? What brought you to San Antonio?
They gave me the option to choose any city in the territory. Just justified. I mean, I could have moved to Dallas if I could have justified it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be in a city where there was a team.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you want to be somewhere where you could, easily go to a ball game when they're home? And I looked at Little Rock, I looked at Tulsa, I looked at San Antonio, and then I was, it's like, well, there really isn't a choice. If I were married, I might have gone to Tulsa.
Okay.
And had kids, but I didn't. And Arkansas, Little Rock was a surprising possibility.
Yeah.
But my very best friend lived there. He was the operator of the Arkansas Travelers, the legendary Bill Valentine. And I told somebody, if I move to Little Rock, I will weigh 300 pounds within 2 years because we'll go out eating and drinking after every doggone ball game. And he's an epicure and a wine guy, and I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be dead.
We got to know our limitations.
And so San Antonio was it, and it was a great choice. Great choice.
Loved it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well let's just get started. I had no real understanding as to what the Texas League was, the history of it. If somebody said, "What's the Texas League?" What do you tell them?
One of the longest, maybe the second most storied minor league in the entire system behind the International League, which I think came into being in the late 1870s. The Texas League was first formed in 1888, and while it wasn't continuous until the early part of the 20th century, it was a big deal in Texas from the very beginning. It had its ups and downs and seasons when it started and didn't complete, but great players have been playing in the Texas League since the very beginning. I mean, I was looking at a year to remind myself. Chris Speaker, one of the greatest ball players in the early part of the 20th century, won a batting title at Houston in 1907, Hall of Famer. Right up to guys like Ron Santo, Willie McCovey, Joe Morgan, all played in the Texas League.
Roberto Alomar,
yeah,
I saw.
Brooks Robinson.
Yeah.
So it is in both legend and fact. It's a well-known league for developing players, and the legend comes in with, of course, everybody knows the term Texas Leaguer.
Yeah, so that was one of the questions I had been told to ask you. What is the origin, and what is a Texas Leaguer?
I'll give you what I think it is, and I'll give you what is the probably the neatest answer.
Okay.
What I think it is, back in those days, in the early part of baseball, it was not uncommon for players to go from any level to the big leagues. Back then the Texas League was an A level, might even have been a B classification, but because there were no farm systems, you had scouts for every major league team or networks of people that they would talk to, and they would, it's like, well, see this Hill guy down in Fort Worth. He if you need somebody, he deserves a shot.
Yeah.
And what I think happened is you'd get somebody going up to the big leagues and he'd, shoot a flare just over second base, out of the reach of the infielder. And that was derisively called a Texas League hit.
Okay.
The dying quail, the flare. And that probably has the best, provenance to it.
Okay.
It makes sense. Now, the one that I liked the best was the story of, a couple of cowboys are at a Fort Worth ball game, and one says to the other, "I bet you can't shoot that ball out of the air." And the old boy says, "I'll bet you I can." And here comes a fly ball, and cowboy shoots the ball right out of the air. Ball drops dead as a doorknob behind second base, and that was a Texas League hit. I think that's rather unlikely.
Sure,
but who knows? It might have happened.
So what the person who asked me said that they had heard that it was because the lines used to be so long in Texas League games, the fence was so far back that the outfielders played further back. But he said, I don't even know where I heard that. I just heard that once.
It's not. It probably has. That is true. But I think it's much more to do with a weak hit just out of the reach of the infielders.
Okay, the Texas League, when I looked it up and I was trying to do some research, there's zero chance I'm gonna be able to get through even a small amount. But it looks like almost every team of any population in Texas at some point had a team.
Yeah.
Now it's all double A teams, and it seems to be sort of much more. I'm not gonna say corporate, but it looks like back in the olden days or the older days, it was kind of a local Texas league and everybody had teams. And is that true?
Yep. I mean, it even amazed me when you go, I was writing those teams down because it's like, I'll never remember them all, but it's hard to imagine today that a place, like Temple or Greenville or Cleburne or Corsicana or Paris.
Oh yeah.
Texarkana, Sherman, all of these teams were regularly appearing from 1888 until, about 1910.
Okay.
And again, it really isn't a whole lot different than today. It's like follow the money.
Yeah.
These were big cotton towns or oil towns or railheads, where people were passing through or there was money, banking, whatever. Yeah. And that's what happened back then is, a banker's son would be enamored with baseball and he'd convince his father to buy, the team in East Jabip and take it to Greenville or wherever.
Yeah.
And so those kind of things happened, or, they were, the team wasn't doing well. They were not drawing any people, and they'd, up stakes and move to the next town over. And get some fresh cash.
Yeah.
But those kind of things were not uncommon even into, the early 60s when baseball was in a trough where you had, Rio Grande Valley or Victoria moving and going to somewhere in Oklahoma, and then Rio Grande Valley 2 weeks later going into Victoria.
And there were the Rosebuds, and then there was a different Victoria team
too. The
yeah.
Giants.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and that was, again, you when you knew your history, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I understand that. Back in the early part, there was lots of moving around because of the instability of the sport and getting things established, and then after the war, mid-50s, things were not very prosperous, and people were just looking to find, where can we go to make go somewhere and stay 3 or 4 years and then move on to greener pastures?
Well, and I mean, you also got to think in the 1910s, no one was sitting at home watching TV. I don't even know if people were really listening to radio then. So
no.
No.
The first broadcast didn't come in until the end of the 1920s or end of the 19-teens, and not popularly until into the 20s.
Okay.
So yeah, you did have movies, but they were silent. You had no air conditioning. You had no television. You had no radio.
People were dying for entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I loved it. I saw your Express News article, and you're holding a jersey of the Wichita Falls Spudders, and I grew up kind of between Wichita Falls and Burke Burnett in the country, but that sent me down a rabbit hole reading about the Spudders. And I mean, I grew up there and never heard of them my whole life, so it's just this fascinating history. But if you go on the Wikipedia page, there's got to be a list of 80 teams that have been in the Texas League at some point. I mean,
absolutely.
It's just nuts.
Well, and the interesting thing is it's the Texas League, but even in the very first season, it wasn't an all-Texas league. New Orleans started the season in 1888. It didn't finish it. And the last time it was an all-Texas loop was 1932 when the Shreveport ballpark burned down, and on May 20th, they relocated to Tyler.
Okay.
And so from May 20th until the end of the year, it was 8 teams in the Texas League, and then 2 teams moved to Oklahoma the next year, and we've never had more than 6 since, and sometimes, as few as 3. So it's a.
So what's the number of teams in the league, and sort of how has that ranged over time?
It's mostly been 8.
Okay.
Never been more than 8, and then there was a period of years when it was 6, and that was in the early '60s, and during that period of time, we teamed up with the Texas League teamed up with the Mexican League. And had an interlocking schedule for a few years.
How great.
You'd go on a bus trip that would take you through 6 cities over 12 days, if you can imagine it.
Yeah.
And we had an interlocking all-star game and an interlocking championship series. Texas League pretty much dominated the Mexican League in that period.
So has the Texas League's teams, have they always been affiliated with some major league team?
No, that like the rest of the minor leagues, that was an invention that really was not common until it didn't begin until about the late 20s, and Branch Rickey, the Branch Rickey, began buying teams to get players and, signing players and assigning them to levels, because at that time the Cardinals were cash poor and they couldn't compete with the Yankees of the world or the high dollar folks to buy talent. So it wasn't a common thing until, the 30s, but even some Texas League teams didn't have affiliations into the 40s. On the other hand, San Antonio was an unusual situation, as they were owned by the St. Louis Browns from 1933 until 2 years after they moved to Baltimore. So they didn't have an affiliation; it was an owned club.
Huh. Is that uncommon?
Yes and no. It was uncommon. It was not common in the Texas League. But it just happened that way here, and it great stability, but lousy product.
Yeah.
They didn't win much in that period. St. Louis Browns were not known as one of the better teams in baseball.
So how long did they own the Missions?
33 until, it was after, it had to have been 56 or 57 because Brooke Robinson played here for 2 years.
Okay.
So that takes them into the mid-50s anyway. And then they became a privately owned club, but then they were owned for a period of time by the Houston Astros, 64 and I think 63 and 64, or actually the Colt 45s. And that's how San Antonio lost its baseball team after the 64 season. Hoffheinz had opened up the Astrodome and didn't want competition, so he moved the team to Amarillo, and they had a pretty good steel and concrete ballpark on the south side, Mission Stadium, which laid empty. And then when the Texas League was trying to get back into San Antonio, Hoffheinz refused to rent it to him and actually tore it down, which was just a sin because it only opened in 1948. And that led to the field being built out of pieces from other ballparks on this campus of St. Mary's.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. They had a lighting system from Victoria and seats from the old Houston Bus Stadium in Houston. And a group of Houston or San Antonians got together to, put that all together, VJ Keefe Field, what became VJ Keefe Field. So yeah, really interesting history when you look
So they had gone to Amarillo, and then y'all.
Well, another team, they got, again, this was a period of baseball that was in a real economic trough.
Yeah.
So musical chairs were being played.
Okay.
And I would have to look. I'm not sure where it came from, but it might have been. I just don't know. But
so how long were we without a team?
65 through 67.
Okay, not long.
No, not very long.
That's another question we get, because you're going to mention this, how it became, there was a St. Louis Browns sort of affiliate, or then it was a Milwaukee Brewers affiliate. The missions just here changed affiliations multiple times in like 30 years, I looked.
Oh, yeah.
How does that happen, and why does it happen so regularly?
Sometimes it's a major league decision. The Dodgers had been here for 20-some years and then decided that they wanted to go somewhere else. I'm sorry. No, it was a missions decision. The Dodgers, they changed ownership and at L.A. and the people running the Dodgers, it wasn't the same. And so the San Antonio club decided they were going to look, and that's when Seattle came in.
So did Seattle have to get out of a different AA team to get them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, when you have an affiliation or a franchise, you're guaranteed of an affiliate because you're one of 30.
Okay.
There's only 30, or there's only the number of teams at the major league level as there are AA.
Okay.
So before expansion, 26.
Yeah.
And then quickly up to 30, and we had to find, 4 places in AA and 4 places in AAA and loads in A-ball. But anyway, so if you make the decision that you want to switch, you know that there are going to be people out there that might want to talk to you. In San Antonio, it's, the Texas League is a desirable place to be because it's the farthest west.
Okay.
And so there's all sorts of people west of the Mississippi that would like to be out of the Eastern League or out of the Southern League and more contiguous to where they, operate.
There's no AA leagues more west than Texas League?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seems like a relic.
Well, it's and it's somewhat of a sore point, and so clubs have a lot of control, and it's like, I can remember St. Louis got crosswise to my friend Bill Valentine, and he decided, they were going to put them out and bring the Angels in, and the general manager of the St. Louis Cardinals at that time, it's like, well, we need a new ballpark in Little Rock, and he said, well, I got him a new ballpark, New Haven, which at that time was probably one of the worst places to have to go.
Well, it's still not that great.
They were in a ballpark that Lou Gehrig played in.
Oh, geez.
In the 19-teens.
So the affiliate has a say as well as the major league team.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the old days when I started, they were year-to-year contracts, and you never knew. Now you sign a 2-year or a 4-year agreement, so somebody has a little bit of stability.
Sure.
And some people, it's like, well, I want to keep, this club around, and they'll push for a 4-year agreement. And others will say, no, I want to have feet to the fire all the time.
Yeah.
So that my major league affiliate doesn't get complacent.
And then their just whole roster and everybody rotates whenever their affiliation changes.
Absolutely, everything.
That's so wild to me.
Trainers, managers, coaches, players, the whole thing. But it's been that way for forever. I mean, I was in the Eastern League to start off with, and the year before I went to my first club, they were the Texas Rangers. And then Milwaukee came in, and I had Milwaukee for 5 years, and then they left and went to El Paso, and I got the California Angels.
Okay.
So it just depends. It depends on relationships, and then you have, some clubs that have been with the same team forever, and they like the city that they're in, they like the ballpark, they like everything about, where they are. That may have described the Dodgers situation here until something changes.
Yeah.
And oops.
So the Missions were part of the Texas League the whole time you were there, but now
Yeah.
they're a AAA team, right?
Yep, Pacific Coast League.
So who replaced that slot in the Texas League?
Ironically, Amarillo.
Okay. Did they not have a team before? Or did they move up the team?
They had been out of affiliated baseball since the 80s.
Okay.
And justifiably so. The ballpark that they had played in back when they were in the Texas League, Potter County Stadium, was across the street from the stockyards and the slaughterhouses.
Nice.
And I talked to players that had played in the league back then, and I said, "Oh yeah, if the wind shifted the wrong way during a ball game, you practically wanted to vomit where you stood. It was awful.
Yeah,
it was awful." And the ballpark was built in '48, and it was just not well kept.
Yeah.
But they're back, and it was a mono economy, basically, a lot of agriculture, cattle, that kind of thing. 5 years prior to the Missions leaving, I had been having conversations with Amarillo because I had read that they were trying to build a ballpark downtown, and I wanted to advise them on how not to make mistakes so that if something came available, they would be looked at.
Yeah.
And I said, do not take this as we're looking at Amarillo. We're not.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to advise you and, be ready.
Yeah. Position yourself.
You never know.
Yeah.
And I didn't think we were going to have an opportunity in, a decade. Never envisioned the Missions all of a sudden going to AAA. And so they built a downtown ballpark that's just fabulous and drew, extraordinarily well. And one of the real shames of this pandemic is that they had practically sold all their tickets for the for the 2020 season. They had no tickets left for the All-Star game, which they were going to host, which is out.
Yeah.
So again, but again, that the Missions went there from, San Antonio to Amarillo in 65, and then San Antonio to Amarillo in 19. It just
kindred.
Sort of a symmetry to it.
Yeah. So how did the Missions move up? Is that is league decision, or is the owner of the Missions or any owner always trying to move up?
No, it's not always, but Dave Elmore, who is the owner of the Missions, had a club in Colorado Springs for a long time, and the Pacific Coast League and Major League Baseball really wanted to be out of Colorado Springs for a number of reasons, mostly weather.
Mm-hmm.
Weather, altitude, the ballpark wasn't to the level that they liked, which is sort of ironic. It's a lot better than Mission Stadium, but it isn't Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And travel in and out of there wasn't as easy. They were always having to bus up to Denver, to fly out. Well, it's easy when you own a AAA club and a AA club. You say, okay, I'm going to move my AAA club to San Antonio. And fortunately, we had a place for them to look at and go to with a new stadium. It often doesn't work that way.
So he owned the Colorado Springs team that was AAA, and we were AA, and he just switched them.
Yeah.
And you get league approval?
Oh, well, he did. He needed multiple. He needed Pacific Coast League approval, Texas League approval, minor league baseball approval, Major League Baseball approval. Everybody had a little piece of it, and I think the only person that was not real happy because we were losing, the historic franchise in the league, and also the pivot. When you've got clubs in Corpus Christi and Midland, and then the next club up is Frisco, and then you've got the North Division. When you lose that hub, there's going to be some clubs that are going to have a whole lot of travel added onto, going up to from Corpus to Amarillo as regularly as Corpus would have to. I told somebody, it's like, man, I'm glad it's not going to be my problem.
So did the affiliations remain the same with the Missions?
Did. Okay. Yeah, San Antonio. No. San Antonio inherited the affiliation that Colorado Springs brought with them.
Okay.
And then San Diego, who had been the affiliate here, went up to Amarillo.
Okay. One of the things I read about you personally is that you sort of oversaw kind of a really successful expansion in attendance through the Texas League, as well as new stadiums were built for, I think, all the teams while you were there. Much. What do you attribute it to? Because I remember the first time I went to the Round Rock game when they would have still been a AA team, and it was a festival. I mean, it was a spectacle. You felt like you were not watching baseball. It was family friendly. And I was like, what do you attribute the big rise in attendance to be during your time and under your watch?
I think it was luck, some of it. I mean, when you have a Nolan Ryan fall into your lap and a management team led by Jay Miller, who, had successes other places, and, they built the first really modern stadium, 360 access, berms all the way around. And we had people that were doing things promotionally that were, entertaining.
Yeah.
But they brought it all together. But it really started, I'd say, early 80s. And it was the financial expansion of the United States. There was lots of money being made by a lot of people in the stock market business. And there's only X number of major league clubs that you can have a chance to buy. And there were people that love sports, and it's like, well, where can I get involved? And just an example, I bought the team that I owned in the Eastern League April 1 of 1980 for $35,000 and $1,500 worth of debt. It was not very long after that a club sold for $1 million. It was after I sold, by the way. I didn't benefit from that. I wish I'd held on for a little longer, but that wasn't I wanted to get to the big leagues. And so things were going exponentially all that time until, today you've got minor league clubs that, are worth from, $5 to $40 million.
Yeah.
Just depending on the market. Probably have clubs you can't put a value on. I don't know how you would put a value on a Round Rock.
Yeah.
Or
are they still a huge draw?
Or a Sacramento or a Dayton, which has sold every ticket that they ever printed.
Wow.
And it's at the A level because it's a community thing. And we were talking about Lowell, Massachusetts before we started, which is a short season club, same kind of thing, where they had, like 800 consecutive sellouts or, some ridiculous thing.
And most of their revenues are ticket driven at those levels, right?
Well, yes and no. You've got a wide range. You've got, tickets, you've got advertising, you've got souvenirs, you've got concessions, which is big.
Yeah. No real media, though.
Well, you're starting to get some internet revenue now. It's certainly not as big as at the Major League level, but there is that out there.
Yeah.
Minor League Baseball partnered with Major League Baseball to form, baseball interactive media. And I think, we were the first AA league to stream all of our games.
Okay. On video?
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that you could probably watch every long season game now on streaming live. And so there's revenue associated with that. So, and I know that there are some old time owners that it's like, we had no idea. We had no idea what, the potential. And it's moved forward from there, from Round Rock to, all the other ballparks and what they're doing and what they do at the ballparks when ball games are not being played. They've got huge events up in Tulsa between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. And University of Arkansas plays games at the ballpark in North Little Rock. San Antonio's had spring classics and, featuring Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's not a mom and pop business anymore.
Yeah. No, I didn't realize how big of a deal it was. Because I got so many questions, we're just going to start getting through some of these.
All right.
How bad did the steroid scandal bleed over into AA ball?
Probably not much.
No, nothing you noticed?
No, I'm sure there'd be the odd guy that, looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's like, oof.
Something must be going on. You talked about I saw sort of the teaser for your almanac, and there was a reference to Dizzy, who pitched. I didn't understand what it really meant. It almost sounded like a back-to-back no-hitter and a double-header or something. What was it?
No, gosh. I don't know what that. Dizzy Dean played in San Antonio, or he was based at Fort Sam Houston.
Okay.
And he used to sneak out and pitch, professionally, not quite AWOL, but close to it. No, I don't. We've never had a guy.
I should have written down what it said because I didn't really. Oh, it says he pitched and won at both ends of a doubleheader.
That wasn't uncommon back then.
What does that mean?
That means he started and won both games of a doubleheader.
Okay, so that sort of brings me to the question. Obviously, you're not allowed to throw that many pitches now, right?
No.
Okay, what are some of the other changes you've seen in sort of your baseball career that's meant to extend the longevity of players? Which ones do you think are good decisions, and which one do you think maybe weren't the best decisions?
The one thing that irks me more than anything is basically from the time I started until a few years ago. If you started here, you pretty much finished here. If you were a better than fair player, you'd spend an entire year at the same level. Now what they're doing, because let's say you get drafted and you sign and your season starts in late June and you play that short season till August. Okay. What they'll do is they'll start you somewhere and then advance you at the mid-season, so people are never spending an entire year. The better players are never spending an entire year at one level. They'll spend, half of 18 at A and AA, and they'll spend half of 19 at AA and AAA. So they're getting a full season in one level, but it's split between 2 calendar years.
Huh.
And from a historic standpoint, what that does, it's like, well, we're never going to have anybody that's going to strike out 200 batters in a season anymore because they're just not here long enough, or it's going to be accidental because it's Joe Putz who's never getting out of AA and all of a sudden he's lighting it up. And you're never going to have a 40 home run hitter. You're very rare to have 100 or a 30 home run hitter or 100 RBIs. And I think those are, baseball is a very statistically talked about game. You loved, I can remember seeing, guy hit his 40th home run, last guy to hit 40 home runs in the Texas League. And it was a guy from Wichita in the 90s. And that kind of stuff is fun. Or you want to see a guy, approach a record.
Yeah.
Those kind of things don't happen. I don't know whether they're handling pitchers with kid gloves or not. That's way beyond my pay grade. But it does seem to me that, the old rule of thumb is the more you throw, the more you strengthen your arm. And other people are saying, well, it's, the more you only have so many pitches and you only have so many high pressure pitches.
Yeah.
The first pitch to the batter isn't the same as a 3-2 pitch with the bases loaded in the 8th.
Sure.
Well, if you're getting to the 8th, high leverage stuff. So it's, you see guys throwing 120 to 160 innings, and 160 would be really high.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember, good grief, a kid named Bill Mooneyham, Wild Bill, high-level pitcher for the A's, and he threw, I have no idea, he had to have thrown over 180 pitches because he struck out 17 and walked 14 in a 9-inning complete game shutout. And in 2 separate innings, he walked the bases loaded and struck out the side. Well, if you just throw 3 pitches to the strikeouts and 4 pitches to the walks, 4 times 14 and 3 times 17. Right there, that's a lot of pitches.
How long ago was that?
That would have been 1981.
Okay.
And then when I was with Pittsburgh, we fired a manager for allowing one of our prospects to throw 160 pitches. That would have been
y'all fired him?
That would have been the mid '80s. Well, he would, just under orders. And then there was a pitcher named Chuck Hartenstein who pitched in the Texas League and pitched the first 18 innings of a 24-inning game. And when the manager came to get him, he was absolutely ticked off. He said, I didn't, I don't know, I threw 180 pitches, I think, by that point. He said, but I didn't throw hard enough to hurt my arm. And I had some pitches left in me.
I mean, you should know.
And that would have been, 68 or so.
Okay.
Or mid-60s,
Okay, so that sort of segues me to another question that I got was, what are sort of some of the most unbelievable Texas League feats? You hear people say the hardest play in baseball is, I don't know, is it an unassisted triple play or a perfect game?
Right.
What are sort of some of the hardest plays or biggest achievements you've seen in Texas League?
Oh, Lord, that I've seen? I'll tell you this. The saddest story is the one I didn't see.
Okay.
But 98, I had seen the first 9 of a 10-game homestand here in San Antonio. Well, I didn't see the 10th game because I was going to Little Rock in advance of the All-Star game to, just get situated. And I'm at dinner with the general manager and the president of the ball club, and the general manager comes by. He said, you won't believe this, but Tyrone Horn has just hit 4 home runs in San Antonio. And I said, Pete, come on. You don't hit 4 home runs in a homestand at Wolf Stadium, because Wolf Stadium was known as the hardest place to hit a home run.
Why?
Because when the sun set, the wind would generally come in from blow from right center.
Yeah.
And knock everything down. You were pretty much having to pull things either way, but if you hit straight away, you knock it down. Well, by golly, he did. He hit not only that, he hit a home run cycle. He hit not in order, but he hit a solo home run, a 2-run home run, a 3-run home run, and a grand slam in the same game. And nobody had ever been able to tell me or anybody else that it had ever been done in professional baseball before. Wow. And it's being the historian that I am, it's like, you've got to be kidding me.
As you sit here today, did you ever figure out if it's ever been done before?
No, nobody's. I talked to historians that from various levels that were writing books on minor league baseball, and it's no. I mean, the stories that I would tell, it's like we had a guy that hit 8 home runs in a game. Now, that was early century, 51-4 game, and
how do you even get 8 at bats?
Well, 51. His teams hit 24 home runs and scored 51 runs.
Oh, the team had 8 home runs. I thought you were going to say a person had 8.
No, a guy named Justin Clark, J.J. Clark, catcher, hit 8 home runs in the game, and he came up he might have come up as many as 10 times in the game.
How?
Well, it's a long story. Anyway, we also had a guy that hit 3 home runs in an inning.
Jeez.
And that was an 18-run inning. He led off and closed the inning with home runs and hit a home run in the middle. Matter of fact, almost hit for the home run cycle in 1 inning because all of his 3 home runs were with solo or different men on base. And we also had a guy hit 2 home runs in 1 at bat. Now, how do you do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Joe Pignatano, playing for the Fort Worth club, 50s, came up and hit a home run. As soon as he touched home plate, opposing manager came out and said he batted out of order. Maury Wills was supposed to bat, so they called Wills out and put Pignatano back to the plate, and the second pitch he saw, he hit another home run.
Oh, jeez.
And I told somebody, if I was the manager of the other team, you would never be able to find that pitcher again because Pignatano could barely hit the ball out of his own hand.
So do both count?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But it's still
it's
a great
story. Yeah. I'm gonna keep working through this, but one thing I had written down that I want to know is, what do you think San Antonio's biggest hurdle is going to be in getting a major league team to come here? I mean, I read we're the biggest city without a Major League Baseball team. There's been a whole lot of discussion just in the time I've been here about getting one.
That's a hard question to answer, but I think population density is, if you look at other markets that are, Pittsburgh's only got 400,000 people. Well, yeah, Pittsburgh's footprint, is really small.
Yeah.
But if you put the footprint that San Antonio's market has over Western Pennsylvania, they've got, multiple millions of people.
Okay.
And that's the same with almost every market there is in Major League Baseball. It's not just the population of the city itself.
It's a metro area.
It is.
Yeah.
You've got to have a lot of people to support, a Major League team.
Yeah.
You see those areas that don't are the ones that have been historically struggling, the Tampa Bay market, the Oakland market, where they're not the dominant team in that market,
right,
as Oakland is not compared to the Giants.
Yeah.
And the Tampa Bay market, hard to explain why it wouldn't, but I think it's older, and a lot of people are not, they're fans of teams from the East where they were born and raised, and not necessarily teams, loyal to the Rays. So that's that, and that, we're a tourist city, we're a military city. We're becoming a little more of a manufacturing city, but not to the, there isn't the corporate support.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Large corporate support that other, you can go into Houston and, that they're going to get.
Oh, yeah, totally different.
Dallas, Fort Worth, other markets, Chicago, huge corporate. We just, here in San Antonio, we don't have it to the level.
Is our ability to support the Spurs the way we do, does that not give us any indication of how we could or could not support a pro baseball team?
Well, but you throw you start throwing competitors into the mix at the major league level. Now are you slicing the support that the Spurs have in half, and now do they start struggling? It's. I
mean, is it binary like that? People support one or the other?
Well, there's companies really do have only so many dollars to spend.
We're talking more from the corporate side.
Right.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And even fans, how many times are you going to go to a major league game if you're already going to a Spurs game? Are you going to cut that in half? Yeah. Again, everybody there's only the pie is so large.
I mean, I went to an Astros. Luckily, I got real lucky. I got to go to Game 7 of the World Series this year, but the Astros game I went to before that, there was nobody there, and I thought, how do the economics of this work? And it must be because television and some of those things that are just feeding such a different revenue stream in.
Right.
Yeah.
When you've got clubs that have billion-dollar cable packages, the 20 years, just monstrous amounts of money.
Oh, the media contracts are crazy for all sports.
The money that comes nationally, and the hidden stuff at major league level is the amount of money that Major League Baseball is generating on interactive media is huge.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It really has been a game changer for major league sports, certainly Major League Baseball.
Based on your experience working with the Texas League and just your knowledge of baseball, has the economics for baseball been getting better? Maybe because I live in San Antonio, it seems like the NBA is just skyrocketing in terms of sport, like the sport that is getting the most growth in such a short amount of time. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
Is baseball going through an expansion, or are they sort of stagnating?
I would say right now it's sort of on an even, it was on an upward scale a few years ago. I think right now you're seeing a plateau. But if you look at minor league sports, you certainly see there's been a tremendous growth.
Sure.
When I came into the Texas League, if you drew 300,000 people, you were in high cotton.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of years toward the end when every team in the Texas League was, the floor was 300,000.
Okay.
Same number of
season,
games.
you mean.
Yeah, same number of games. But again, it's the evolution of the business, being better operators, better promoters. It's the facilities, certainly. When you get a new facility, you see a big bump. and then the better operators then try and keep that bump.
Yeah,
which is hard.
I mean, Round Rock had all those activities for kids and everything. I mean, it was a full service family event.
Well, and they're one of the paragons. I mean, they started out drawing 600,000 people, and I don't think they've ever, since 2000, drawn fewer than 600,000.
Wow!
If they have, it's the high 590s.
Yeah,
and that's very rare. Sacramento, there are very few clubs that can do that. Generally, what you see is a 3-year bump, and then you start to see a decline and then a plateau.
Which is also strange. I mean, Sacramento does have a pro sports team, but I get it with the Round Rock Austin area. I mean, there's that's the only game in town, really.
Right, but again, it's all about density.
Yeah.
And you're not having to draw as many people. They're not. So let's say they average 8,000 a game times or 10,000 a game. If the Sacramento Kings were drawing 10,000 a game, they wouldn't be in the NBA.
Yeah, right.
And their ticket prices are, 5 times or
Sure.
more what minor league baseball can charge. But the growth has been there. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, the Round Rock thing blew my mind when I went because I expected it to kind of be a dumpy stadium and kind of a bad product, and it was. It was all the bells and whistles.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's some of the questions other people asked me. Somebody said, "What's some of the best talent you saw come through the Texas League while you were there, specific to?" Like Roger Clemens went through the Round Rock whenever he was coming out of retirement.
Yeah,
didn't he?
exactly.
I mean, is that probably the highest profile player you saw dip into the Texas League?
Randy Johnson pitched at El Paso, and they were hanging from the rafters. It was just Was
that an injury rehab thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right.
And that's like, when he came down, of course, before I was Texas League president, Fernando Valenzuela went on was in 3 or 4 different Texas League ballparks, and in Little Rock they were putting people on the field and roping off. There were so many people. I mean, that was after Fernando started here, and he really became popular here in San Antonio.
Okay.
And then he was a star in the Dodgers, and he hurt his arm, and the Angels signed him, and just wild.
Yeah.
I mean, so many tickets sold. It was just unbelievable.
That's great.
To the point that the Angels affiliate at that time was Midland, and they were going to call him up. And the Midland people screamed like stuck hogs. It's like, wait a minute, you've just made tons of dough for people in Jackson and Little Rock and wherever. Can't he make a start at home?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well,
one game at least.
Yeah, one start at home, and they filled the ballpark.
All right. What about the best you saw come through the Texas League and never made it? Injury or bad personal decisions? I'm sure you saw some crazy talent come through.
It's that you tend not to remember those.
Yeah.
It's like they just sort of vanish because it's like once they, maybe they went to AAA and, were never heard from again. Oof. Or, they're guys that have had great statistical years, but you knew that they weren't the best prospect. They just were having an ungodly year for whatever reason, and then, come back to earth, and it's like, that's not a surprise.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, I was asked, who came through the Texas League that you thought, never really made that big of a splash, but then went on to be a monster in the majors that was kind of surprising? Not
so much a monster, but the catcher that Ross.
At the Giants?
No, or with Boston, Chicago Cubs, and
yeah, that's right.
And it's like mercy. He didn't even play that much.
Was he in the Texas League?
Yeah,
with who?
San Antonio, I think. But there's all sorts of people, but that's one that's like, well, boy, he came out of nowhere. Or generally they're catchers. It's like, because if you can receive and throw, you can hit 118 and you're going to get some time at the big league level because of, if you're smart and work with pitchers and that kind of thing, the hitting is
secondary.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've written 2 books. Give me a quick rundown on what they are and what they're about.
Baseball in the Lone Star State was about 18 stories of from the 1800s, up to current day, just chapters on individual people, great stories,
Okay.
unusual stories. One that had to be changed at the last minute was really pretty interesting. It was a story about the thrust of the story was, the unknown Lefty Hamilton, a mystery. Well, Lefty Hamilton, until we wrote the book, was noted as having thrown the first no-hitter in the Texas League. And the winter before the book was put to bed, I did one of my crazy projects. I looked at every box score in the Texas League from 1889 until 1960-something when they stopped printing, or 1970-something when they stopped printing every box score in the daily paper, out of town, everything. And it was actually the last, I was looking at 1889 at the library up at UT. My eyes were like this, crossed. I was just tired. I was, ready to get this done. And all of a sudden I'm looking at a box score and it's like, this is odd. And shouldn't be a no-hitter here. And I went to 3 different newspapers to confirm that it was a pitcher that had thrown a no-hitter in 1889. And I rushed home and I called David King, who was the co-author and actually did the writing.
Yeah.
I said, David, we got a problem. He said, what? I said, Lefty Hamilton just became more obscure. He said, why? What happened? I said, we're going to have to change it. Well, that's a good story. I said, yeah, but I just found a no-hitter from 1889. Oh.
What was the significance?
Well, there was really nothing that you could find about Lefty Hamilton. Okay. And that was the beauty of the story. Okay. He threw the first no-hitter supposedly in the Texas League history. Now you find another no-hitter, and Lefty Hamilton just becomes another guy.
Gotcha.
And that was like, we had to, and so we interwove that in the whole story. It's like Lefty Hamilton was still the star, but even more obscure now that we know.
Yeah. Was there any sort of real source of Texas League history before y'all started working on it, or is it kind of just mix-mash?
There were a number of, there was a guy named Bill Ruggles who worked for the league from like 1920 until 1964 as their, historian statistician. And he wrote 3 books on, basically they were, first one was all the players that ever played in the Texas League just listed alphabetically. And then another one was, now adding in team histories and rosters and that kind of stuff. And the league had always put out some kind of history, book.
Sure.
That was updated periodically. So I had these tools that, but some of them it's like, well, a guy named Wood threw a no-hitter in 1940, but we don't know the date and we don't know his first name. And so you those kind of things intrigued me. And then you'd find other things that you weren't looking for. I mean, I wasn't looking for that no-hitter, didn't know it existed. But probably the most fun, I was down in Victoria and going through the paper. I'm looking for an 18-inning. I wanted a box score from an 18-inning game. And I would never once I'd get the story, I'd note it, I'd write it down on the margin and then put it aside and I'd read it later. But every now and again, you'd see a number that was out of place. I'm sure in your business, you see documents and it's like, wait a minute, go back there.
Yeah.
What's that? And I noticed a number that didn't belong where I saw it, and it was 18. Well, the pitcher that came into the game in the 10th inning and pitched the final 9 innings struck out 18 and lost. And in the story, it said, hard luck Danny Rivas struck out 18 again and lost. And it's like, whoop, what's this?
Yeah.
Go back. Well, 6 weeks earlier, he'd started a game, threw all 10 innings, struck out 18, and lost that one. And there's another one. I went to historians. I said, have you ever heard of a pitcher striking out 18 batters in a game, once as a starter and once in relief, and losing both? Never heard of it. And again, the underlying story of that is Danny Rivas was a better regarded pitcher than Juan Marichal in the Dominican Republic. He was a monster in the winter leagues.
Okay.
And here he was,
being a monster, but losing.
Yeah, and he went to the big leagues with the Giants briefly. But those are the wonderful things, the stuff that aren't in the books that you find and love that history aspect.
Yeah, it's a needle in a haystack a little bit. You've really got to get into it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so we're about out of time. I want to end this on Dr. Lesh, who's been a guest on the show. He's the one that introduced me to you, which I appreciate very much. Tell me about your David Lesh possibly and almost owning the team that he was possibly going to be on, because he brought that up, and we're going to end on that story.
Well, it started, I'm sitting in the San Antonio airport minding my own business, and I'm next to somebody, going on the same flight, and we got talking, and what do you do? I'm a professor at Trinity. And I said, what's your discipline? And he said, what are you a professor? I said, what would you give you that idea? Well, nobody asked me what my discipline is. Yeah. Only people in the game know that. I said, how would you know to ask that? I said, I don't know. I said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm farthest part of the world from where you are. Yeah. I'm president of the Texas League. Oh, really? He said, I've got somebody you might want to meet, member of my department. Well, it was David. So we go to lunch and we start comparing notes. And he was, professional pitcher briefly. He said, where were you? I said, I own the Brewers AA club briefly. He said, no kidding. He said, I was supposed to be drafted by the Brewers. He said, it was just an accident that the Dodgers saw me and drafted me, or else I might have played for you. And it's like,
what a small world.
It sure is.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. I knew nothing about the Texas League. I know a whole lot more now just getting ready for this, and I'm going to pick up one of your books because I think it's just a fascinating slice of kind of Texarkana, really, which is something I really like. So thank you for joining us today. This will be up, and I'll give you the link, and so you can send it out. And we're going to get a picture of your baseball card, right?
Oh, that or me in front of the Sphinx, or I don't know what.
Well, any of those will work, yeah. Okay, that does it for this episode of the Alamo Hour. Thank you again, Mr. Kayser, for being here. We appreciate it and giving us some of your knowledge. Your two books are?
Baseball in the Lone Star State, the Texas League's Greatest Hits, and the Texas Baseball League Almanac.
Okay, and both of them you can get on Amazon because I saw them recently.
Co-author David King, who really did the heavy lifting. I did the research and the editing, but...
Well, and I appreciated the prices because Dr. Lesh's books are like $90 and yours are normal price. So
that's the difference between a book that's read for fun and a textbook.
That's right. All right, so my guest wish list continues. I'm still hoping one day I can get Coach Pop to come on here. Jackie Earl Haley. In the next episode, we're going to have Michael Watts coming in at the 10-year anniversary of BP, talking about his work on the BP case and how the feds pursued him and led to him being indicted and tried on 50 felonies. Which he beat in representing himself. So it's going to be a fun, interesting conversation. And he's actually the reason I live in San Antonio. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next episode. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Alamo Hour. You are all what make this city so great. We hope you join us next week. In the meantime, subscribe to our podcast.